G'day and welcome to the latest instalment of the International Journal of Sport Nutrition and Exercise Metabolism Humans of Sports Nutrition series. Today we have with us Joel Craddock, and Joel is the first author of a upcoming paper in the journal looking at vegetarian research and its influence on athletic performance. Joel, first of all, thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you became interested in the topic?
Yeah, I suppose I read a book called The China Study by T. Colin Campbell about 4 or 5 years ago, and that was the first time I thought about using a vegetarian or vegan diet, or the first time I realised it could be associated with positive health outcomes. So I decided to do a little experiment with myself. I decided to go vegan just to see how it felt, and I felt fantastic. I had more energy, and I actually lost a little bit of weight, which helped with my cycling. And so I suppose I've been vegan ever since. But I'm also into cycling and long distance triathlons and ultra running. So I suppose it's just a marriage of the two, my passion for nutrition, health and physical performance.
So you really got into the research yourself through vegetarian eating, looking for sports performance as opposed to environmental concerns or other ethical or religious concerns?
Yeah, decided for health and to see if it could improve my performance. Since then, I suppose it's gone down the environmental aspects and animal rights issues. So I suppose I'm vegan for all three: health, environment and animal rights. But yeah, it started as a health and seeing how I could push my own diet and performance, I suppose.
Okay. And so you've done a systematic review looking at vegetarian eating and sports performance. Can you talk to us about what you might consider to be some of the greatest challenges of research in this area from the various studies that you've looked at?
I suppose from a study design perspective, it's very difficult to get vegan and vegetarian athletes and people on to get them to eat meat, because they're usually vegan and vegetarian for ethical reasons. So if you're going to do a randomised control trial, you can't tell them to, now you're going to be in this group, you're going to eat meat and dairy. So you've got to think of other ways to do your experiments. You can't do crossover designs because they're not going to be able to eat meat and dairy. So I suppose thinking about the study design beforehand and really nailing it is a bit of a challenge, I suppose.
Yeah. Oh, it is one of the sort of great difficulties of the area. The other area that you point out in your paper is looking at this aspect of dietary standardisation. Now, obviously, as you've just described, it's very difficult to do crossover type studies, but can you talk to us a little bit more about some of the dietary standardisation you've seen within the research that you've looked at, and maybe make some comments about whether the appropriateness of that?
Yeah, sure. So we know that nutrition is going to greatly affect exercise performance and metabolism. So if we're not controlling diets before a trial's carried out, then we're going to get some variability in there. So in the studies that I reviewed, a couple of them didn't really report on any standardisation. Some of them did. Some of them looked at controlling carbohydrates in the macros, so they had specific carbohydrate amounts, specific protein amounts and fat amounts. Others said to stick to your habitual diet before the study commenced. So there was some in the paper which did address this, but there were a few that just didn't. They either didn't report it or they just neglected to even consider it. So I'm not sure. But having said that, it's for the results, it's going to be difficult to, well, not difficult, but I think you've got to review them with caution.
Yeah, and you mentioned with regards to the design and the crossover aspect of the design, I mean, obviously you could take omnivorous eaters and then put them on a vegetarian diet for a period of time. The challenge being either letting them do that and self-report their intake, or actually prescribing food intake for them. Has anyone actually taken a group of omnivorous eaters and then actually prescribed food for them for a period of time as part of the studies you've seen?
Yes, I think 7 out of 8 papers I reviewed did that from memory, which is great, but that brings other problems as well. So we know that physiological adaptations can take a while to occur, so we need to put them on a diet for a while, and as a researcher that can be difficult, and again getting past ethics might be a little more challenging. But in the paper that I've just about to publish, the diets lasted from 4 days, getting omnivorous eaters going to vegetarian or vegan, and that lasts from 4 days. which in my opinion isn't enough to see these changes.
Yep.
And that went to 12 weeks.
Okay.
So again, that's the upper limit, but I think it still should be longer.
Yeah, because obviously people can follow vegetarian diets and do follow vegetarian diets for decades, not periods of weeks, and the implication for that, I think, is potentially vastly different from acute periods where you're switching over. So if I said to you, look, you've got 10 seconds or a short period of time to describe what you want somebody to take away from your paper, what would it be?
10 seconds, ooh. Well,
short summary.
Okay, I was shocked with the lack of scientific evidence that was out there, considering that in the Commonwealth Games in 2010, 7% of the athletes there were vegetarian, so that's almost 1 in 10. And these guys are at the elite level, and there's so much money thrown at Olympics and trying to get increased performance. That was only 8 studies that I identified. I was just shocked that there wasn't much research. So I think more needs to be done, I suppose.
Okay, and that leads to the obvious question, which is, has it influenced future work for yourself?
Yes. So this paper was part of my master's, and now I'm doing my PhD. And looking at the gap in the research, I'm going to try to fill out a little bit. I'm going to start looking at immunity, so vegetarian and vegan diet, how that influences immunity, and then if that spills over onto improving performance through, I suppose, a few mechanisms. But definitely, yeah, that's where I'm going to spend the next couple of years working.
So potentially future Dr. Joel Craddock?
Hopefully. That's a few years away, but yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. Joel, thanks for your time and thanks for your support of the International Journal of Sport Nutrition and Exercise Metabolism. We look forward to hearing some more results coming from you over the next period of time.
Thank you very much for having me. Cheers.